We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Osama bin Laden's son, Hamza, chosen heir to the leadership of Al-Qaeda, has been killed, U.S. media reported on Wednesday, citing American officials.
Rwanda has shut its frontier with Ebola-hit Democratic Republic of Congo after a third case of the deadly virus was detected in the border city of Goma, the Congolese presidency said.
And at the ASEAN summit, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo insisted that Washington was not asking Southeast Asian nations to choose between his country and rival power China.
Right or left?
And Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden went on the offensive on Wednesday against his main 2020 opponents, but was rapidly assailed on the debate stage over key issues like health care, race, immigration, and criminal justice.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Osama bin Laden's son Hamza, chosen heir to the leadership of Al-Qaeda, has been killed, according to U.S. media, citing American officials. NBC News said 3 U.S. officials had confirmed they had information of Hamza bin Laden's death, but gave no details of the place or date. The New York Times subsequently cited 2 U.S. officials, saying they had confirmation that he was killed during the last 2 years in an operation that involved the United States. Questioned by reporters in the Oval Office, President Donald Trump did not confirm or deny the NBC report. Both reports suggested that bin Laden may have been killed well before the U.S. State Department announced a $1 million bounty on his head in February of 2019. The 15th of Osama bin Laden's 20 children and a son of his third wife, Hamza, thought to be about 30 years old, was emerging as a leader in the Al-Qaeda franchise, according to the State Department in announcing the reward. Sometimes dubbed the Crown Prince of Jihad, he had put out audio and video messages calling for attacks on the United States and other countries, especially to avenge his father's killing by U.S. forces in Pakistan in May 2011. Documents seized in the raid on his father's house in Abbottabad suggested Hamza was being groomed as heir to the Al-Qaeda leadership. U.S. forces also found a video of the wedding of Hamza to the daughter of another senior Al-Qaeda official that's believed to have taken place in Iran.
The Bureau of Immigration is set to deport a Jordanian national who reportedly worked with a brother-in-law of the late Al-Qaeda terror group leader Osama bin Laden, who was arrested in Mindanao early last month. Immigration Commissioner Jaime Morente on Thursday said 51-year-old Mahmoud Afif Abdel Halil is now under the custody of the government after his arrest by joint operatives of the BI, Armed Forces of the Philippines, and Philippine National Police in Zamboanga City last July 4. The BI chief issued the mission order that led to the arrest of the foreigner, who will be deported for illegally entering the country. We are going to deport him for being an illegal entrant, as he has no record of arrival after he was arrested and deported in 2003 for being an undesirable alien, Morente said in a statement. He added that Abdel Halil assumed a fictitious name and resorted to misrepresentation on and falsification of public documents, which enabled him to reside in the country. It was learned that authorities started monitoring the Jordanian's activities in the country when he and his Algerian companion were flagged down at a military checkpoint in Zamboanga in August last year. After months of intensive surveillance and case buildup, it was confirmed that the alien has been unlawfully staying in the country. During questioning, Abdel Halil claimed that he returned to the country in 2007 and admitted that he was previously arrested and deported by the BI in 2003 for having an expired visa and involvement in clandestine terrorist activities as a Palestinian under the name of Mahmoud Afif. When he was earlier arrested, authorities said the Jordanian served as the point man of Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, a Saudi businessman and bin Laden's brother-in-law, in managing several charity organizations in Mindanao that funneled money to Al-Qaeda and the Abu Sayyaf group.
To other news now, a North Korean soldier crossed the demilitarized zone that divides the peninsula, according to Seoul's military on Thursday, in a rare direct defection across the heavily fortified frontier. More than 30,000 North Koreans have escaped to the south since the two were separated by war more than 65 years ago, according to Seoul government data, many of them driven by prolonged economic hardship. But the vast majority have gone first to the north's neighbor and ally China before making their way to the south, usually via a third country. Only a few have dared to cross the DMZ, which is riddled with landmines and has a heavy military presence on both sides. In November 2017, a North Korean soldier made global headlines when he dashed through the border village of Panmunjom in a hail of gunfire from his own side. The trooper, then 24, was hit several times but survived. The defection announced on Thursday, which took place in the central part of the peninsula, was only the third such crossing since then. The man was seen late Wednesday night in the DMZ moving in a southerly direction after crossing the military demarcation line that forms the border, according to Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff in a statement. Aside from the fact that he was a soldier, there was no immediate word on the man's identity or his motives.
Senior UN officials said a second patient to be diagnosed with Ebola in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's largest city, Goma, has died. Experts warned that the latest incident could accelerate the spread of the disease, which has killed over 1,800 people over the past year and became the second worst outbreak on record. Watch this.
Tomorrow will mark 1 year since the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo declared an outbreak of Ebola in North Kivu province. And yesterday in Goma, a miner working in the province of Ituri became the city's second case of Ebola. He reportedly died this morning. In reaction to this new case, the Ebola Emergency Response Coordinator, David Greasley, and the World Health Organization Assistant Director General for Emergency Response, Dr. Ibrahima Sosefal, said they are mobilizing all aspects of the response to stop the spread of Ebola in Goma. As I said, surveillance at all points of entry and points of control in the area are being stepped up. They're also increasing community engagement, risk communications, and active case finding. In a joint statement to mark the 1 year milestone, the Director General of the World Health Organization, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordination, and the Executive Director of UNICEF, as well as the Executive Director of the World Food Program, issued a joint statement adding that this latest case in such a dense population center underscores the very real risk of a spike in disease transmission, perhaps beyond the country's border, and the very urgent need for a strengthened global response and increased donor investment.
Meanwhile, Rwanda has shut its frontier with Ebola-hit Democratic Republic of Congo after a third case of the deadly virus was detected in the border city of Goma, according to the Congolese presidency. In a statement, it said there had been a unilateral decision by the Rwandan authorities that affected citizens from both countries who had to cross the border for their work. Goma is the capital of North Kivu province, which has borne the brunt of the outbreak that began on August 1 last year. It is a lakeside city of more than 2 million people that has an airport with flights to the capital Kinshasa, Uganda's Entebbe, and Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, as well as a port that links to Bukavu and South Kivu province. Health experts fear outbreaks in major cities where population density and high mobility make it far harder to isolate patients and trace contacts compared to the countryside. In other news, China's military has released a slick propaganda video showing a drill of armed troops quelling a protest in Hong Kong in a thinly veiled warning to the city's pro-democracy movement. Let's take a look. The video, posted to social media by the Chinese People's Liberation Army or PLA garrison in Hong Kong, has a caption in which the military declares it has the confidence and capabilities to maintain security in the semi-autonomous southern Chinese city. The 3-minute video showcases the PLA's tanks, helicopter gunfire, rocket launchers, and other military hardware in action in Hong Kong, as well as heavily armed troops performing an anti-terrorism drill. It also features an anti-riot drill in which armed soldiers, armored personal carriers, and water cannons are used to disperse a crowd of protesters. The drill ends with armed troops escorting protesters who have their arms tied behind their backs being led to areas designated by banners as detention points. The release of the video came on the same day dozens of people appeared in court in Hong Kong after being charged with rioting for their alleged involvement in an anti-government protest over the weekend.
Fireworks are launched from a moving vehicle towards protesters who had gathered outside Hong Kong's Tin Shui Wai police station to show their solidarity with a few detained demonstrators. Here's more.
In other news, a 3-year-old boy has survived a fall from a 6th-floor balcony in southwest China after neighbors caught him with a large blanket. Take a look. Video of Monday's incident shows the boy clinging onto a slab and trying to climb back up onto the balcony while his feet kept slipping. Moments later, he lets go and falls onto a large white blanket held open by onlookers. The incident happened while the boy was home alone and while his grandmother was out buying groceries, according to police. Now, it's unclear how he managed to open the glass railing on the balcony. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Health is our most important asset, and it should always
Sa gitna ng dilim, ako ang mata sa sahig papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang paglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden went on the offensive on Wednesday against his main 2020 opponents, but was rapidly assailed on the debate stage over key issues like health care, race, immigration, and criminal justice. Tensions rose rapidly between the former Vice President and Senator Kamala Harris, the most prominent African American in the field, as the two reprised their clash from a month earlier at the debut debate. But while Biden aimed aggressive attacks at Harris and her health care plan, other rivals in the second night of the two-night 20-candidate debate sought to undercut him on a host of issues. Biden is leading polls for the nod to take on President Donald Trump in 2020, and nearly all of the other 9 Democrats on stage attacked him at some point.
If you notice, there's no talk about the fact that the plan in 10 years will cost $3 trillion. You will lose your employer-based insurance. And in fact, you know, this is the single most important issue facing the public. And to be very blunt and to be very straightforward, you can't beat President Trump with double talk on this plan.
Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans. So I think that you should really think about what you're saying, but be reflective and understand that the people of America want access to health care and do not want cost to be their barrier to getting it.
So you want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work to get us to a point where Medicare for all, where everyone is covered. But this pitting against progressives, against moderates, saying one is unrealistic and the other doesn't care enough, that to me is dividing our party and demoralizing us in face of the real enemy here.
Thank you,
I'm going to keep fighting for that end.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Kamala Harris just talked about Kathleen Sebelius, who helped write her bill. This just pointed to the fatal flaw in her proposal. Sebelius works for Medicare Advantage, private insurance company who will stand to profit under her plan. If we're seeking to really reform our healthcare system, we've got to shut out big insurance and big pharma out of the drafting process so they cannot continue to profit off the backs of the sick people in this country who are searching and in desperate need of care.
Well, unfortunately, Representative Gabbard got it wrong. Kathleen Sebelius did not write my plan. She endorsed it as being one of the plans that is the best to get us to a place where everyone is going to have access to health care in America. And when we talk about this again, I'm going to go back to Vice President Biden, because your plan does not cover everyone in America by your staff's and your own definition.
In one of the few moments of broad unity on stage Wednesday, several candidates joined Biden in condemning Trump.
Joe Biden told wealthy donors that nothing fundamentally would change if he were president. Kamala Harris said she's not trying to restructure society. Well, I am. For 40 years, working people have taken it on the chin in this country. For 40 years, the rich have gotten richer, and they paid less and less in taxes. It cannot go on this way. When I'm president, we will even up the score, and we will tax the hell out of the wealthy.
We've been consumed by a president who frankly doesn't give a damn about your kids or mine. Mr. President, kids belong in classrooms, not cages. And they deserve something better than a bully in the White House.
But like many of you, I don't want to make America anything again. I don't want us to go backward. We're not going back to the past. We're not going back where we came from. We're going to move forward. We're going to make America better than it's ever been in the years to come. Let's do that together.
Just look at this stage, made up of very diverse people from diverse backgrounds. Went on to be mayors, senators, governors, congresswomen, members of the cabinet, and yes, even a vice president. Mr. President, this is America, and we are strong and great because of this diversity, Mr. President, not in spite of it, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, let's get something straight. We love it. We are not leaving it. We are here to stay, and we're certainly not going to leave it to you.
Said that since the 1970s,
Senator Cory Booker took a stab at a breakout by entering into a searing exchange with former Vice President Joe Biden over his criminal justice record.
This is one of those instances where, since the 1970s, every major crime bill, major and minor, has had his name on it. And sir, those are your words, not mine. And this is one of those instances where the House was set on fire, and you claimed responsibility for those laws. And you can't just now come out with a plan to put out that fire. We have got to have far more bold action on criminal justice reform.
I find it fascinating. Everybody's talking about how terrible I am on these issues. Barack Obama knew exactly who I was. He had 10 lawyers do a background check on everything about me on civil rights and civil liberties, and he chose me, and he said it was the best decision he made.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Had those segregationists their way, I would not be a member of the United States Senate, Cory Booker would not be a member of the United States Senate, and Barack Obama would not have been in a position to nominate him to the title he now holds. And so, on that issue, we could not be more apart, which is that the Vice President has still failed to acknowledge that it was wrong to take the position that he took at that time.
I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so.
My entire career, I have been personally opposed to the death penalty, and that has never changed. And I dare anybody who is in a position to make that decision, to face the people I have faced, to say, I will not seek the death penalty. That is my background. That is my work. I am proud of it.
This is the fourth debate that we have had, and the second time that we have been debating what people did 50 years ago with busing, when our schools are as segregated today as they were 50 years ago. We need a conversation about what's happening now.
And finally, the Democratic presidential candidates called out U.S. President Donald Trump during the last remarks of the second night of the second debate, as they all hope to win over him in 2020 in what Vice President Joe Biden called the most consequential election anyone has ever participated in.
On January 20th, 2021, we'll say together, adios to Donald Trump. We're up here with makeup on our faces and our rehearsed attack lines, playing roles in this reality TV show. It's one reason why we elected a reality TV star as our president. We need to be laser focused on solving the real challenges of today.
The way we beat Donald Trump is not just focusing on him. He wants to take all the oxygen out of the room. It's when we start focusing on each other and understand.
We're in a battle for the soul of America. This is the most consequential election any one of you, no matter how old or young you are, has ever participated in. 4 more years of Donald Trump will go down as an aberration. Hard to overcome the damage he's done, but we can overcome it. 8 more years of Donald Trump will change America in a fundamental way. The America we know will no longer exist.
In Barcelona, Spain, sometimes the capital is called Barcelona is sometimes called the capital of pickpockets, and Filipinos there are sometimes victims of these pickpocketers. And Lynn Tumbagadies, our EBC correspondent, got to talk to some of them. Lynn?
The cases of theft and pickpocketing in Barcelona, Spain continues to get worse. Now the thieves are more aggressive, forceful, and hurting the victims to steal. Recently, there were Filipinos who suffered and became victims of theft. A case of theft happened on a 76-year-old Filipino who chose not to show his face on camera. He was on his way to have his blood test and health checkup when he was attacked by thieves. It happened in the morning in the vicinity of his apartment. 2 men attacked the victim. He was strangled in the neck while the other one snatched his wristwatch, which has a worth of €500. He has lost consciousness. He was confined in the intensive care unit and now recovering and waiting for a schedule for his heart bypass operation.
So ano po ang nangyari sa inyong insidente ng pagnanakaw? Pwede niyo po bang ikwento kung ano pong nangyari?
Hindi ko nga alam na ining nagmalay tao ko noong Sabado ng alas 12. Wala akong kamalay-malay. Yun lang naramdaman ko na kinuha yung relo ko. Tapos sinakala ko, yung isa, dalawa kasi sila ining eh. Sinakala ko nisa, wala na akong hininga. Siyempre, ay sakit na ganun, tagal na sinakala ko.
Opo. So,
tapos yung isa, hinalbot yung relo ko. Yun ang ano ko.
Nahimatay na po kayo?
Hinimatay ako doon na ako. Hinimatay.
So, dinala po kayo sa ospital?
O sa kwan, tumawag yung kapitbahay namin ng ambulansya. Dahil yung unang ambulansya, walang aparato. Yung pangalawa, yung mayroong pam-pam dito. Kaya ang sakit dito ang dibdib ko. Kaya itong inano ko sa doktor. Pero sa awan ng Diyos, ayos naman na.
So, gano'n po kayo katagal dito sa ospital?
15 dias na kami ngayon. Pag 15 dias na kami ngayon. Dahil kapon sana, lalagyan ako ng bypass. Kanya lang, akupado yung makina. Kaya, sa Sabado sana nasa bahay ka na ako. Pero sabi ng doktora, book sa Lunes. Yun. Tapos Martes lalabas na ako kung may awan ng Diyos.
Na-i-report niyo po ba sa polis ang...
Umisis ko nag-report. Nagpunta ng kuwan sa ng police. Department of Police.
Opo. Ano po ang sabi ng polisiya sa inyong pong asawa?
Tapos, ng hapon na yon, pinuntan nila, sinama yung misis ko. Ituturo mo kung kilala mo yung mukha. Pero tatandaan na niya, isa lang yung kulot na kuwan. Kasama ng magnanakaw.
So, totoo po ba yung sinasabi ng iba na kayo po ay nakomatose daw po?
Yung
hindi po kayo nawalan po kayo ng malay ng ilang araw? Hindi po kayo ising?
Sabadong alas 12 ng umaga. Kasi nangyari yung Biyernes ng umaga. Pero inorhensya ako. Yung pagising ko ng Sabado ng alas 12, nagtataka ako kung bakit nandito ako. Wala akong kamalay-malay yung sa nangyari na yun. Pero si misis ko, siyang nakakaalam lahat. Dahil siya ang kasama ko. Dahil magpapa-analysis na sana kami. Siyempre, yung analysis alas 8 mag-umpisa. Doon pa sa Saria. Hindi pa namin linilipat yung aming kwan doon.
So, ang gagawin niyo po sana ng araw na yun ay pupunta po kayo ng ospital
Yung
para
hospital
magpa-check
na
up.
magpa-check up ng
Ang nangyari naman po,
mag-a-analysis ako dahil
nandun po.
dapat yun alas 8 nandun ka. Yun.
So, ganun po ang nangyari.
Another case of theft happened to Marie Claire Rivera, Filipina who has been living in Barcelona for 10 years. From being a victim, Marie Claire became an organizer of free trainings in the community together with martial arts experts. She is active in the campaign for the safety and awareness against pickpockets and violence.
So, ano po yung nangyari sa inyo na insidente ng pagnanakaw po? Pwede niyo pong sabihin sa akin?
Actually, just a week ago, may hinating kaming kaibigan ko na turista rin here sa Barcelona. Pagbalik namin ng bahay, as in next street lang to our house, medyo maliit na street yon. May dalawang lalaki na nakasunod namin. I already warned my husband. Tapos pag next ligon ko na sa kanya, ginarab niya na yung reload ko, which is only like a swatch, which is like small amount lang naman yun. Pero yun, basta nila ginrab ko, dalawa silang lalaki, which is medyo mga small build lang din naman, but very fast, so quick lang na nangyari yung ganung incident sa amin. Tapos magkasama pa kami mag-asawa.
Ano ba yung naging effect po nito sa inyo? Yung pagnanakaw incident po na nangyari po sa inyo?
Ano yan actually parang second na pangyayari. Siyempre of course, una-una traumatized. And pangalawa, galing din ako kasasakit before. And ang effect sa akin, even na kahit na alam mo na parang aware ka na kung ano yung gagawin mo, medyo parang nagkaroon ako ng hypertension, tumaas ang sugar level ko, tumaas ang yun lang naman ang ang medyo nakakatakot doon. Pero or less okay lang, pero sa lahat ng malamang lahat ng mangyayaring incident dito sa ibang tao, ganun talaga matotrauma sila sa ganung pangyayari. Well, sa ngayon, I came up with the campaign of self-defense saka yung self-awareness for the use of salbatos. Kasi ako, sa tingin ko kasi, yung sa experience ko, I'm with my husband and bilang babae, or kahit yung mga matatanda, hindi naman kami makakalaban sa ganung mga klase ng ng bigla. And so I think of salbato because this could be a warning sign at saka to draw away na yung mga thief dito sa community. So ito yung kinakampanya ko para magkaroon man lang sila ng awareness or safety or warn na kasi ito ay recognized ng polisiya even and on my previous work as well, ito ay parang kasama to sa mga trainings din namin using of the salbatos. And meron din kaming inaayos na training for this sa mga Filipinos on every weekend, so kanilang free time for self-defense, yung basic training. Like, for example, pag ginirab yung kanilang wallet, tinutukan sila ng patalim, at least man lang magkaroon tayo ng alis pati yung fear natin sa mga ganitong instances ng mga pagnanakaw or kahit paano nawala yung ating takot sa kanila.
Unang-una, kasi ang karamihan ng mga Pilipino talaga rito, tayo trabaho, wala tayong time na katulad dito magti-train, yung iba nahihiya, yung iba natatakot, so nagbigay ako ng free session na katulad dito na pwede magtuloy-tuloy. Depende sa mga darating para makatulong din na may iwasan yung ganong mga incident na mananakawan, maaksidente, mabigyan ng konting kaalaman para maiwasan yung ganong sitwasyon. Tsaka unang-una, mas maganda kasi meron talaga tayong knowledge. Hindi naman to porket malaki, maliit, mas bali man niya kito sa ika nga. Kailangan na may alam tayo kahit konti. Hindi natin alam, sabihin natin na mag-ingat lagi, ganyan. Lagi naman tayo nag-iingat, pero kahit mag-ingat tayo, kung nanakawan tayo, wala tayong magagawa. Kailangan natin magkaroon ng knowledge against them sa mga bad guys na yan. Kung hindi, aabusuhin nila tayo lagi. Yun lang.
Knowing that thieves always come up with new modus operandi, Barcelona residents are preparing themselves by participating in self-defense training. Many Filipino residents are trying their best in helping different organizations that aim to keep Barcelona a safe place for tourists and residents. From Barcelona, Spain, I'm Lynn Bautista Tumbaga Diaz, and I'm 1 with 25.
Separate attacks by Shiite rebels and a jihadist suicide bomber killed at least 20 police in Yemen's government-held second city, Aden. Many of them newly trained cadets, security and medical sources said. The attacks were the first to hit the southern port city in more than a year and dealt a heavy blow to the government's reorganized security forces, which have been trained and equipped by the United Arab Emirates. The first attack was a suicide car bombing carried out by jihadists on a police station. The bomber killed 3 officers and wounded at least 20 others, including civilian bystanders, a security source said. The second attack was carried out by the Houthi rebels, who said they launched a drone and a ballistic missile at a training camp west of Aden. A medical source said at least 17 policemen were killed and dozens wounded. The aerial attack hit as senior commanders were overseeing a passing out parade for newly graduated cadets at Al-Hala, a key training camp 20 kilometers west of Aden.
Turning to Yemen, preliminary reports from local authorities in the Katabir district of Sada Governorate in Yemen indicate that 14 people were killed, including 4 children, in an attack on the market on Monday. In addition, 26 people, including 14 children, were reportedly wounded. Several of the wounded are in critical condition. The UN humanitarian coordinator in Yemen, Lise Grande, said this is a terrible turn of events following 3 months in which the number of reported civilian casualties in Sada has been falling. She said the latest deaths were a reversal of everything everyone has been working towards the last weeks and months. Health partners are providing medical supplies to the facilities receiving the wounded, including trauma kits to treat up to 100 casualties. International humanitarian law requires that all parties to the conflict take all feasible steps to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure.
In a related news, Yemen's 4-year war has set back the country's economic development by 20 years, according to a top UN official. The conflict that began after Iran-allied Houthi rebels captured the capital Sana'a in 2014 has killed tens of thousands of people and left millions on the brink of famine, according to the United Nations.
I saw a kind of desperate resilience, but also a deep sadness. A nation that essentially has lost its ability to develop, and indeed, according to our latest estimates, has lost 20 years of its development in these 4 years of conflict. People are hungry, people are suffering, their institutions, their schools, their local administration have collapsed, and for many of them, life as they knew it simply has ceased to exist. So much of what I have seen here in Yemen over these days is the human tragedy that falls out when war happens. Our work as the United Nations, the work of the international community, but above all the leaders here in Yemen and in the region need to look at this for what it is. A human tragedy with enormous implications for generations to come if we do not stop this war and begin to rebuild the country.
Yemen's civil war has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with nearly 80% of the population, 24.1 million people, requiring some form of humanitarian assistance and protection.
I don't know if you may know it.
Before the war, Yemen was already the Arab world's poorest country. Mr. Steiner toured the country, visiting Aden, rebel-held Sana'a, and the vital port city of Hodeidah. The UN official also said 1 in every 3 Yemenis is at risk of starving to death.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned. U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell addresses reporters after the Fed, under intense pressure from President Donald Trump to stimulate the economy, cuts the benchmark interest rate for the first time in more than a decade.
We decided today to lower the target for the federal funds rate by 1/4 percentage point to a range of 2% to 2.25%. The outlook for the U.S. economy remains favorable, and this action is designed to support that outlook. It is intended to ensure against downside risks from weak global growth and trade policy uncertainty, to help offset the effects these factors are currently having on the economy, and to promote a faster return of inflation to our symmetric 2% objective.
U.S. unemployment is down and the economy is expanding, but concerns about slowing global growth has prompted the Federal Reserve to cut its key interest rate by 1/4 point for the first time in more than a decade. Wall Street plunged after Powell said the Fed was not on the threshold of a lengthy cutting cycle, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average at 1 point losing nearly 500 points. Powell later clarified, saying that neither was he ruling out another rate cut, and the Dow pared losses to close down a little over 300 points or 1.2%.
And we've gradually moved our policy in the direction of more accommodation. I think what you see is an economy that has reacted well to that. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we're doing it. We never take into account political considerations. There's no place in our discussions for that. We also don't conduct the future path of the target range for the federal funds rate. It will continue to monitor the implications of incoming information for the economic outlook, and will act as appropriate to sustain the expansion with a strong labor market and inflation near its symmetric 2% objective. And again, I'm not predicting that, but I don't think that we know that we'll have less ammo because of these things.
However, President Trump, who had been loudly calling for a rate cut, wasted no time in attacking on Twitter, saying the move fell far short of the aggressive rate-cutting cycle he wanted. The Federal Reserve operates independently of the White House. During a press conference, Powell said the central bank would never move rates because of political factors or to prove its independence. The Fed said its decision to lower the key interest rate despite a strong economy was motivated by fears of a potential future slowdown.
Meanwhile, China said that it had begun purchasing more U.S. farm goods, addressing a key sticking point in efforts to resolve a drawn-out trade war between the two economic giants.
7月19日以来，一些中国的企业，包括国有企业和民营企业，已经就采购新的大豆、棉花、猪肉、高粱等农产品，向美国的供货商进行了询价，而且根据市场的条件，已经有一批 农产品采购成交。谢谢。
U.S. farm exports to China are estimated to be the lowest in years as a result of Beijing's retaliation against President Trump's tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese goods. President Trump said this week that China was supposed to start buying more American agricultural goods, but had shown no signs that they're doing so. His comments came a day after Chinese and U.S. trade negotiators in Shanghai wrapped up their first face-to-face talks since President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to a truce in June. China's total exports during the first half of the year barely rose from last year, while its exports to the U.S. shrank. A meeting of the Politburo, China's top decision-making body, this week emphasized the economy faces downward pressure and new risks, according to the official Xinhua news agency. Economic growth in the second quarter slowed to 6.2%, China's slowest in nearly 30 years.
The Bank of England, or BOE, pushed back against calls to cut interest rates on Thursday, leaving borrowing costs unchanged amid an intensifying risk of a no-deal departure from the European Union. With less than 100 days to go before the country is set to leave the bloc, the BOE's 9-member Monetary Policy Committee, led by Mark Carney, unanimously voted to hold interest rates at 0.75%. The central bank said the government's Brexit stance had prompted a marked depreciation of the sterling exchange rate, with the pound hovering near a 3-year low against a basket of other major currencies. The UK currency traded down almost 0.4% at $1,200 or 2112 shortly after the BOE's decision. Newly elected Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who officially entered Downing Street last week, has vowed to deliver Brexit by October 31, come what may, even if that means leaving without a deal in place.
We can get a new deal, we're aiming for a new deal, but of course Michael is absolutely right that it's responsible for any government to prepare for a no deal if we absolutely have to. And that's the message I've been getting across to our European friends, and I'm very confident that we'll get there. What we want to do is to make it absolutely clear that the backstop is no good. It's dead. It's got to go. The withdrawal agreement is dead. It's got to go. But there is scope to do a new deal. And we're going to come out, deal or no deal, on October the 31st.
In anticipation of Boris Johnson actually winning that leadership race, we've seen the pound falling quite considerably over the last couple of months. So some may have expected that that would actually soften up a little bit and that we may actually see a bit of a bounce in the pound. But it seems that this hard Brexit, no-deal Brexit rhetoric, which we're seeing not just from Boris but from his entire team, has really caused some sensitivity in the markets. And he clearly wants to send this message to the markets and to Europe. We're being very serious about this no-deal Brexit planning. This is the option, and we are leaving on the 31st. And maybe traders just didn't quite expect this this to come in such a significant way so quickly after his appointment.
ASEAN foreign ministers meet their counterparts from Australia, Japan, India at the Bangkok ASEAN Summit. Marise Payne, Australia Minister for Foreign Affairs, expressed her concern regarding the situation in the South China Sea and in the Rakhine State. Let's listen in.
We remain concerned by developments in the South China Sea, including militarisation. The future of this international waterway is significant for Australia. The majority of our trade passes through it every day. We are also concerned about the situation in Rakhine State. We're committed to working with Myanmar, with Bangladesh, with ASEAN and other partners towards a long-term and durable solution.
Meanwhile, Australia also launched a new 80 million Australian dollar or $55 million US dollar program to help Southeast Asian nations combat human trafficking.
The new 10-year, $80 million phase we're launching today will ensure the just punishment of human traffickers and protect the rights of innocent victims.
Australian Foreign Minister Mary Spain said the 10-year program was an extension of Canberra's assistance to the region to tackle the menace in the last 15 years. She said Australia has helped train more than 13,000 judicial officials who bolster their legal systems to fight human trafficking and ensure better protection for victims in ASEAN.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo insisted Thursday that Washington was not asking Southeast Asian nations to choose between his country and rival power China as he trailed a rebooted security and trade strategy at a Bangkok summit. The denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, a bitter trade war between the superpowers and open access to contested seas dominated talks between Pompeo and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of a summit of Southeast Asia's top diplomats. Mr. Pompeo is tasked with reassuring Asian allies that the U.S. remains a key player in the region as China builds up its military presence in disputed seas and airspace and cements its economic and political primacy across the region. The rivalry between the two superpowers is framed by a trade war that has cramped global growth and seeded uncertainty across Asia's economies. Beijing's military ambitions in contested seas and airspace are poised to rub up against a drive led by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to reassert the U.S. role as a key Asia-Pacific power.
In 1, 2, 3.
We don't ever ask any Indo-Pacific nation to choose between countries. Our engagement in this region has not been and will not be a zero-sum exercise. Our interests simply naturally converge with yours to our mutual benefit.
Among the tension points, which China is the South China Sea, an area Beijing believes to be its orbit and outside the U.S. sphere of influence. China is accused of deploying warships, militarizing outposts, and ramming fishing vessels in contested waters, one of the world's key shipping routes and which the U.S. is desperate to keep open.
As Secretary of State, a key part of my mission is to tell the world what America stands for. For decades, American diplomacy with ASEAN has been consistently guided by our desire for a partnership, our respect for the sovereignty of each of our nations, and a shared commitment to the fundamental rules of law, human rights, and sustainable economic growth. Those commitments and a commitment to ASEAN centrality endure under President Trump's leadership. I was heartened to see ASEAN recently release its outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which also supports sovereignty, transparency, good governance, a rules-based order, among many other things. Look, we don't ever ask any Indo-Pacific nation to choose between countries. Our engagement in this region has not been and will not be a zero-sum exercise. Our interests simply naturally converge with yours to our mutual benefit.
The Philippines will never give up any of its positions in the West Philippine Sea as it continues to improve its existing facilities in Pag-asa Island, according the country's largest possession in the West Philippine Sea, according to the Department of National Defense. It must also be pointed out that the Philippines never gave up any of its positions in the WPS during the Duterte administration, and in fact, it's improving the existing facilities of its biggest island, Pag-asa, to accommodate more residents and personnel, according to DND spokesperson Arsenio Andolong in a statement forwarded to reporters Thursday. Andolong added that the Philippines is always ready to defend the sovereignty and sovereign rights using whatever means available, while citing that China may have an advantage in the South China Sea due to its existing structures constructed on its artificial islands, which it has hardened and militarized. Andolong said this is still only a small part of the disputed waterway. He also said although several claimant countries are occupying features in the South China Sea, not one of them has complete and sole control over the entire body of water. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, ratified in 1982 by many countries, including the Philippines and China, is the legal basis of the country's claim of sovereign rights over its exclusive economic zone.
Meanwhile, China staunchly disputes the right of outside powers, principally the U.S., to influence an issue in what it considers to be its neighborhood.
And ASEAN. 对于外国家，我们希望就是不要去刻意的炒作，在南海本来就已经存在的一些历史上遗留下来的一些争议，那么而是应该支持中国和东盟为此做出努力，就更不应该那么利用这些问题来挑拨中国和东盟的关系。当然。因为历史上遗留的一些问题，它可能不免有时候也会那么发生一些现实的摩擦。但是我要告诉各位的是，中国和东盟，特别是那么中美国之间，我们已经有了高度的共识，那就是。
His comments, which did not directly reference the U.S., laid down a challenge to Mr. Pompeo, who arrives tasked with delivering a message of reassurance over U.S. power and influence across Southeast Asia. The administration of Donald Trump, which yanked the U.S. from a massive Asia-Pacific trade pact, has launched a rebranded Indo-Pacific Security, Open Seas and Commerce strategy. That includes ensuring the freedom of seas and skies, insulating sovereign nations from external coercion.
Okay, for the first photo will be the official group photo. Thank you. The next photo is the ASEAN one.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
But first, we apologize for missing those subtitles with Mr. Wang Yi. We'll get back with the developments on that area. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.